Introduction. It is over 3/4 of a century since Schlemihl published his romantic and symbolic story of Peter Schlemihl, the man who lost his shadow. It was received with a general favor that gave it immediate celebrity, has been translated into almost every modern language and has passed for so many editions that it is now fully established as one of the little classics of the world. It is so widely known, there are in current literature, so many allusions to it, and it is rated with so much interest in instruction, that it has a good claim to be read by every educated person. The realistic power with which that URL is constructed, the stereoscopic distinctness of the characters, the naturalness and consistency of the incidents, the width and humor with which the pages are bound, give the work an attractive charm, amply sufficient of itself to carry the reader delightedly along from the beginning to the end. In addition to this, there is a bewitching mystery in the fundamental idea of the story. The narrative is a series of latent riddles loaded with the medical morals, just what those morals are. It's difficult to explain. Perhaps the author intended to live this aspect of his artistic creation wrapped in indefiniteness on purpose, to provoke the mental activity of his readers, that each one might get at the significance of the work for himself. It is well known that Just was in the habit of saying, when asked what he meant to teach by a particular poem or tale, that it has no definite didactic purpose. He declared that he wished to convey you need all that his readers could discover, either in the words or between the lines, and that he expected the results to be as varied as the talents and requirements brought to the task of interpretation. No doubt, however, there will be many readers of the strange adventures of Peter Schlemihl, who will be glad to receive a little help in understanding the real meaning of the chief incident in the experience of the central person. Namely, the loss of his shadow. The critical reader will find that this artistic and weird narrative is at once a romantic evil, an ethical epilogue, a witty satire and the philosophical parable. This points shall now be briefly shown, and later on, further elucidated in the notes. In the outset, it is quite obvious that the thought of the writer is not confined to the literal shadow itself. Deeper than this and far more important, there is hidden a parallel spiritual significance. What is then the metaphorical moral correspondence of the physical shadow thrown by a human body when it intercepts the light? The reputation of a man among those familiar with him is the shadow cast by his character. This is the idea they entertain of him. When he goes to a foreign place where he is a stranger, he carries no reputation. He has lost his model shadow. The impervious signal is prevalent concerning him. There prevents the appearance of any adumbration of what he is, for where there is no light to be intercepted, no shadow can be thrown. Shadows are alike impossible, in complete darkness, and in universal radiance. It is because when a man is with his acquaintances, his character is partly known and partly unknown, has one aspect illuminated and one darkened, that he flings a shadow. The shadow is his social repute, but when he appears in a new place, where he is a total, he no longer possesses this. And to be wholly without repute is to be unlike those around you. And to be unlike your fellows, is to be cut off from sympathetic union with them, and to be regarded as guns with suspicion and weed fear. Hence, the distress of Peter Schlemihl. And what a profound thought connected with the subject is that he who casts no shadow thereby proves that he is himself no substance. He who finds the light with the background behind him, and yet remains shadowless Eastern's parents to the day shines through him. He therefore cannot belong to the order of living men, but must be some kind of supernatural or preternatural being accordingly. He's isolated from the wholesome class or normal creatures who shrink from the uncanny phenomenon with terror. Hence, again, the suffering and grief occasioned to Peter Schlemihl by the loss of his shadow, which, although in itself it seems to be nothing, is still a sign indicative of much to those who can interpret it. But after all, the principal lesson of the narrative is the lesson of the comparative value of things, as between spirit and matter, which is the enduring reality in which the elusive phantom is between outward show and inward worth, which is the shadow, and which the substance in one passage of his work, Show Me, so represents Peter as being much displeased with a company of persons who spoke seriously of trifles and triflingly have serious things. This is the keynote. Things are to be esteemed according to their genuine values, not according to their mere appearance. Peter himself practiced the inverse of this, when he sold the companionable index of his personality for a copious supply of gold, and bitterly did he ruin his family, for he soon learned that peace of mind and friendly communion with his fellow men on equal terms, were the incomparable good of life. The veritable substance of money was merely a hollow symbol on the whole. Then, the supreme lesson inculcated by the experience of Peter Schlemihl is this. What a man is, creates his reputation. His reputation is what other people think of him. That they should think well of him is one of the most important element of his happiness. His social shadow is the projection of his personal character. This index may be mistaken or changed or taken away. But his genuine character is incommunicatively his own property. Character cannot, like money, be indiscriminately exchanged among men. However, its outward indications may be confused. However, its conventional accomplishments may be altered or forfeited. It is itself the intrinsic reality, the invaluable solid. Therefore, it must never be subordinated to anything else, nor its appropriate signal be bartered away for any seductive counterfeit. In most cases, man is not what he thinks he is. In many cases, he is not what others think him. In every case, he is what God thinks him. The truth is, he the Rotem is that he shall himself know just what he is and aspire to become what God would have him be, and have introduced introduction. Chapter 1 of the wonderful history of Peter Schlemihl, the man who lost his shadow. This is a Leap of Ox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. More information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Ashley. The Wonderful History of Peter Schlemihl, the Man Who Lost His Shadow by Adelbert Montana. So, translated by Frederick Henry Hatch. Chapter 1. After fortunate but for me very troublesome voyage, we finally reached the port. The instant that I touched land in the boat, I loaded myself with my heat effects and passing through the swarming people. I entered the first and least house before which I saw a sign hang. I requested a room. The servants measured me with a look and conducted me into the garret. I caused fresh water to be brought and made him exactly just guide to where I should find Mr. Thomas John. For the north case, the first country has on the right-hand side lacy has a red and white marble, many columns. Good. It was still early in the day. I opened that once my bundle stands my new black cloth coat, clad myself clearly in my best apparel, put my letter of introduction into my pocket, and so on the way to the man who was to promote my modest expectations. When I had to send the long north street and reach the gate, I soon saw the pillars glimmer through the foliage. Here it is, then, thought I wiped the dust from my feet with my pocket handkerchief, put my nakla in order and rang the bell. The door flew open. In the hall, I had an examination to undergo. The quarter, however, permitted me to be announced, and I had the honor to be called into the park, where Mr. John was walking with a select party. I recognized the man at once by the luster of his corpulent self-complacency. He received me very well, as a rich man receives a poor fellow even turned to work. Me without turning from the rest of the company. I took the offer letter from my hand. So my brother, I've heard nothing for a long time. But he's well, there, continued he, addressing the company without waiting for an answer and pointing with a letter to a hill. There I'm going to wrap the new building foot now, here as follows through the opening chapter, the author in the case of the satirical subtlety, the contrast in the manners of the rich towards the poor, and those of the poor or the rich fetuses of insolence. Sec we assess, he does prepares the way for his central theme, namely, the inverted relation and human life of worth and esteem. Truth and seeming, Milton noticed the fact that the self-sufficiency bred by the habit of looking down upon the barriers often leads to a new class of thoughtful and sympathetic attention. He says, courtesy is sooner found in lowly sheds, the smoky rafters than tapestry halls and courts a princess where it first was named, and footnote. He broke the seal without breaking off the conversation which turned upon riches. He got to stop master of a million at least he observed his, pardon me the word oh, how true, I explained with a rush of overflowing feeling that pleased him. He smiled at me and said, stay here, my good friend. In a while, I shall perhaps have time to tell you what I think about this. He pointed to the letter, which he then thrust into his pocket and turned again to the company. He offered his arm to a young lady, the other gentlemen addressed themselves to the fair ones. Each found what suited him at our policy towards the rose blossoms mount. I slid into the rear without troubling anyone, for no one troubled himself any further about me. The company was excessively lively. They were stallions and playfulness. Trifles were sometimes discussed with an important tone, but often are important matters with levity, and especially pleasantry float the weight over absent friends and their circumstances. I was too strange to understand much of all this, too anxious and introverted to take an interest in such riddles. We had reached the rosary, the lovely Fanny, the belle of the day, as it appeared, weighed out of obstinacy, herself break off a blooming bough. She herself on a thorn, and that's it from the dark roses for the purple on her tender hands. This circumstance put the whole party into a flutter. English classroom. I sought for a still then lanky, longish oldish man who stood near anyone I had not heard. He remarked, his hand as ugly into the clothesline press pocket of his whole trench. Great happy coat. Perdue, and so a little pocket book, opened it and presented to the lady with a profound sense the required article. She took it without noticing the giver and without thanks. But now, an example of the impoliteness often practiced in polite society. And foot now, the wind was bound up and we went forward over the hill, from whose back the company can enjoy the wild prospect over the green labyrinth of the park to the boundless ocean. The view was in reality vast and splendid. A light point appeared on the horizon between the dark blood and the blue of heaven. Total scope here, cried John, as already before the servants who appeared at the call were in motion. The grey man, modestly ballet, had thrust his head into his coat pocket and drawn Dance to Beautiful Dolphins and handed it to Mr. John, bring it immediately to his eye. He informed the company that it was the ship which went out yesterday and was detained in view of course, by contrary winds. The telescope passed from hand to hand, but not again into that of its owner. I, however, gazing wider at the man, and could not conceive how the great machine had come out of the narrow pocket, but this seemed to obstruct no one else, and nobody travelled himself any further above the grey man. Then about myself, professionals were headed round the choicest fruits of every zone and the costliest vessels. Mr. John did the honours with an easy grace and a second time addressed the word to me. Hope yourself you have not had the like at sea. Eyebrows, but he saw it not, was already speaking with someone else. The company which may have relied upon the sword on the slope of the hill, opposite to the outstretched landscape, had they not feared the deadness of the earth. It were divine. Observe one other party, but we have got a Turkey carpet to spite here. The wish was scarcely expressed on the man in the grey coat had his hand in this pocket, was busy in drawing events with a modest and even humble department. Irish Turkey carpet interwoven with gold. The servants received it as a matter of course and opened it on the required spot. The company without ceremony took their places upon it. For myself, I had notes again in amazement on the man at the carpet, which measured above 20 paces long as head and breadth, and about my eyes, not knowing what to think of it, especially as nobody saw anything extraordinary in it. I would fain have had some explanation regarding the man and have asked who he was. But I knew not to him to address myself, for I was almost more afraid of the gentleman's service than of the served gentleman. At length I took courage and stepped up to a young man who appeared to me to be of less consideration than the rest, and who had often stood alone. I tell softly to tell me who the real man in the grey coat there was. He there looks like an a thread that has escaped that at Attalus Ito, but now a wet quite like that in Bali by Shakespeare in the species of pasta. And but now, yes, he stands alone. I don't know him, he replied. And as it seemed, in order to avoid a longer conversation with me, he turned away and spoke up in different matters to another. The sun began now to shine more powerfully and to inconvenience the ladies. The lovely Fanny addressed carelessly to the grey man, whom, as far as I'm aware, now I've had yet spoken to trifling question. There he had not, perchance also attempt by him. He answered her by no basis almost profound, as if in unmerited honour were done him, and had already his head in his pocket, out of which I saw some canvas bulls, cordage, iron work, in short, everything which belongs to the most splendid pleasure. Hence, the young gentleman helped to expand it, and it covered the whole extent of the carpet, and nobody found anything remarkable in it. I was already become uneasy, they horrified at heart, how completely so as at the very next wish expressed, I saw him get pulled out of his pocket 3 roadsters, I tell the 3 beautiful great black horses with saddle and comparison. We think the 3 saddle horses still out of the same pocket, out of which already a pocketbook, a telescope, an embroidered carpet 20 paces long and 10 broad, a pleasure 10s of equal dimensions, and all the requisite poles and dyers to come forth. If I did not protest to that I saw myself my own eyes that could not possibly believe it. Embarrassed and upset we as the man himself appeared to be, little as was the attention which had been bestowed upon him. Yet to me his grisly aspect, from which I could not turn my eyes, became so fearful that I could bear no longer. I resolved to steal away from the company, which we insignificant part one played in. It seems to me an easy affair. I proposed to myself to return to the city to try my luck again on the morrow with Mr. John. And if I could muster the necessary courage to question him about the singular grey man, had I only had the good fortune to escape so well. I already actually succeeded in stealing through the rosary, and in descending the hill, found myself on a piece of lawn. When preparing to be encountered and crossing the grass I have the path, I cast inquiry glass around me. What was my territory? Behold the man in the grey coat behind me and making towards me. In the next moment, he took off his hat before me and bowed solo as no one had ever yet done to me. There was no doubt that he was to interest me. And without being rude, I could not prevent it. I also took off my hat out also I stood there the sun with bare head as a fruit to the ground. I stared at him full tear. I was like a bird was a serpent has fascinated. He himself appeared very much embarrassed. He raised not his eyes again bowed repeatedly, Junior, and addressed you the soft tremulous voice, almost monotone, a supplication. May I hope, sir, that you are part of my boldness in venturing in so unusual a manner to approach you. But I would ask a favor, permits me most condescendingly. But, alas, explained I in my trepidation. What can I do for a man who we both started, and as I believe, read and after a moment's silence he again resumed during the short time that I have had the happiness to find myself near you. I have so many times allow me to say to you, really contemplated with inexpressible admiration, the beautiful, beautiful shadow which has it were with a certain noble disdain and without yourself remarking it, you cast from you in the sunshine, the noble shadow at your feet, their part. Me the bold supposition, the possible you might not be indisposed to make the shadow over to me. I was silent and the million seemed to whirl around in my head. What was it to make this singular proposition to sell my own shadow? He must be mad that I end with an altered tone, which was more assimilated to that of his own humility. I answered last. Ha ha, good friend, have not used that enough of your own shadow. I take this for business have a very singular source. He hastily interrupted me. I have many things in my pocket, which, sir, might not appear worthless to you. For this inestimable shadow I hold the very highest price too small. It struggled through me again as I was reminded of the pocket and knew not how I could have called him good friends. Resumed the conversation and saw, if possible to say all right again by excessive politeness. Sir, pardon your most humble servants, I do not understand your meaning. How many can my shadow? He interrupted me. I beg your permission only here on the spot to be allowed to take up this noble shout out, put it in my pocket. However, I shall do that be my care. On the other hand, as a testimony of made grateful acknowledgement to you, it gives you the choice of all the treasures which I carry in my pocket, the genuine spring grouped, but now, these are references to facts in the popular tales of Germany. As for instance, spring wurzel, or spring is found in the story of Resolve, and the Gogan man lay or gallows man or little fingers cut out of a rip set by the dealers in such things in the Middle Ages to be actual mandrake roots growing in the shape at the foot of a gallows and foot now to manage a group to change penny, the root dollar, that napkin Roland's page, a magic man at your own price, but these probably don't interest you. Rather are geniuses wishing cap you instantly repaired and a lucky bag such as he had the luck purse of fortune. Notice, I exclaimed, interrupting him, and great as my anxiety was, without one word he had taken my whole mind captive. But dizziness seized me, and double decades seemed to glitter before my eyes. On it, sir, will you do me the favor to view and to make trial this purse? He throws his hand into his pocket, and drew out a tolerably large Welsa purse of steppe origin leather with two shrinks and handed it to me. I pushed my hand into it and drew out 10 gold pieces and again 10 and again 10 and again 10. I sent him eagerly my hands, agreed. The business is done for the purse, you have my shadow here close with me, kneeled instantly down before me. I beheld him with an admirable dexterity gently loose my shadow from top to toe from the grass lifted up well let's together folded and finally pocket it. Here rose at another abyss skins Irish treated towards the rosary. Hi Patsy that I heard him there softly laughing to himself. But I held the purse passed by the strings all around me lay the clear sunshine and within me was yet no power of reflection.